Thank you, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Napolitano, for convening this hearing today on an incredibly important topic. And if you may have gathered, rare in this place these days, one of bipartisan support, because we know, as you indicated, Mr. Bollwage, this is across every single congressional district in America. The low estimate is 400,000, the high estimate is 600,000 sites. They are gas stations in our rural communities at crossroads. They are large industrial sites like the brass centers in Waterbury, Connecticut that I represent. And these are all opportunities as well as obligations for us to do better. So I wanted to lay out a few things, a bit about the bill that Mr. Katko and I are introducing today, get your response, but also to have you think about, while I'm doing that, about some of the themes that I heard from you. The importance of predictability. The importance of de-risking. You didn't use that language, but de-risking is critically important for liability. The assessment grants are about de-risking so that people like Mr. Phillips know what they're getting into. And the importance of saving time, which translates to money. And so if we're going to leverage those private resources, we have to find ways to get determinations. As Mayor Robertson noted, yes or no, let us know so we can move forward. And we're all committed to doing that. We've got what we think, in part, due to many of you and your organizations helped us craft this bill over some considerable period of time, but it certainly can be improved, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and our colleagues across the aisle to get the right bill that can make it through both houses and get signed by the President and get out there making a difference in our communities. So I wanted to talk a little bit about those provisions and lay them out. One, it creates multi-purpose grants. This is something, I was just in New Britain, Connecticut. We don't really have those, so we have right now, our state is doing this. In Connecticut is one of the states doing it, but clearly we heard from everybody, this crosses across jurisdiction. We need more flexibility. To go to the point, Commissioner Daley, I think you mentioned the point of flexibility. We need flexibility. So that's going to allow characterization, assessment, inventory, planning, remediation, with greater certainty over funding streams, and can flow into the area-wide planning revitalization, which I know especially, again, can be important when you've got properties that cross boundaries. It also clarifies and expands eligibility. We've discussed this at considerable length. If we're going to have public-private partnerships, there's not enough money in the Treasury to clean up every one of these properties so it can be eaten, the dirt can be eaten with a spoon. That is not the objective. The objective is to try to get them back into play to make sense to deal with Category 1. Mr. Phillips, of the worst contaminated sites, there are public health hazards, clean those up. And the Category 3, things that can get it back into productive use. How do we leverage those? How do we move both of those categories? To encourage those partnerships, our bill expands eligibility for brownfields grants to certain nonprofits that have been excluded, limited liability corporations, limited partnerships, and community development entities. And I can tell you, Waterbury, Connecticut, where I do a lot of work, this has been a huge stumbling block for them. They have a redevelopment authority. It's not actually the city that wound up with the keys, as Mr. Katko noted. They wind up with the keys, and the entity that is empowered to do it actually isn't eligible for these grants. Well, that's clearly wrong, and with your help, hopefully we'll fix it. It also expands to include governments that acquired the brownfield sites prior to 2002. And we know those legacy sites, how could you possibly have complied with the post-2002 rules pre-2002, unless you were clairvoyant. You were not able to do that. And third, the bill eliminates eligibility barriers for petroleum brownfield sites. We know that in certain communities that has been a huge issue. I've got one 2 blocks from my house, which we're still waiting to get fixed. We've talked a little bit about expanded liability. Commissioner Daley, maybe you can talk a little bit about the multi-purpose grants and what a difference that might make if we expand, as our bill does, to do that.
Sure. Again, I'm sure Congressman, was a wonderful question. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to it. I'm sure my colleagues will agree with me. Anytime that we can provide the most flexibility to local governments to make the best decisions on behalf of their communities, we are going to be moving in the right direction. Anytime we make assumptions, either nationwide or even within a state, that every community is the same and all community needs are the same, I think that we are not moving in the right direction. So when we look at the multi-purpose grants and the flexibility within, especially with smaller communities that have limited resources to even begin the process, we need to provide them the assurance, the federal partnership, and the flexibility so that when they are in the game and they are moving forward, they have the flexibility to do the best they possibly can for their community.
Mr. Phillips, just a quick question on as the private sector representative on this de-risking notion. What are these most important elements, things you like about the bill that we've got out there, things that we could maybe improve as we move forward?
Well, first I would welcome talking to you about some details about the bill. But I would say that, just in your own state, we looked at the Stratford Army Engine Plant. And at the time, there was no clarity on the cleanup at all. We tried, we worked hard, we spent a lot of money, we made a lot of trips, we engaged a lot of officials, and at the end of the day, there were multiple entities involved with this determining who was responsible and how it was going to be cleaned up and we didn't even know where to invest dollars, and we ended up pulling out. That delayed the process by at least 10 years, at least a decade, probably more, because it still hasn't been redeveloped, and they're looking at it now.
Thank you. I appreciate your indulgence, and I'll follow up with all of you. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we can go to the gentleman.